You know what they say about justice? That it's blind. Well, let me tell you something about blindness. Sometimes it runs in families, and sometimes it's willful. My name doesn't matter because this story isn't about who I am. It's about what happens when the invisible child finally becomes impossible to ignore. Picture this: graduation day, law school, summa cum laude, two brothers walking across that stage, identical caps and gowns, identical diplomas. But here's where identical ends. My twin brother, let's call him the golden child because that's what he's been called his entire life. He gets a standing ovation from our parents. Me? I get a polite clap. Same DNA, same education, same potential. Different treatment. Always different treatment. But graduation day was just the beginning of the real humiliation. 3 weeks later, I'm sitting in our family's pristine living room. You know the type, where every surface gleams and nothing feels lived in, watching my parents hand my brother a check. Not just any check. A check with so many zeros, I had to count them twice. $500,000 to start his own law firm. His dream handed to him on a silver platter, wrapped in unconditional love and tied with a bow of endless possibility. Congratulations, son, my father said, his voice thick with pride. You're gonna build something incredible. We believe in you completely. My mother was practically glowing. Our successful lawyer, she kept saying. Our brilliant boy. And me? I sat there like a piece of furniture, waiting, hoping, believing that maybe, just maybe, this was the moment they'd surprise me too. That maybe there was another check with my name on it. Maybe there was recognition that I'd graduated with the same degree, from the same school, with better grades, actually. But no, instead, I got the speech. Oh, that speech. It's burned into my memory like a brand, every word seared with disappointment and barely concealed contempt. Now, son, my father said, turning to me with that patronizing smile I'd grown to hate. I want you to understand something important. Your brother, he's got something special. He's got that spark, that natural charisma, that killer instinct. He's built for this world. But you? You're different. You're steadier, more practical. And there's nothing wrong with that. But you need to stay in your lane. My mother nodded along like she was listening to wisdom itself. What your father is trying to say is that not everyone can be a leader. Some people are meant to follow, to support, to play smaller roles. And that's perfectly fine. You just need to stay humble and know your place. Know your place. Those three words hit me like a physical blow. Know your place, as if my place was somehow lesser, somehow predetermined by some cosmic joke that made me second best from birth. You don't have the same potential, my father continued, and I swear his voice got softer, like he was breaking bad news gently, like he was doing me a favor by crushing my dreams with kindness. The business world, the legal world, it's cutthroat. It requires a certain type of person, and frankly, we just don't see that in you. You're too nice, too soft. You lack the aggressive edge your brother has. I wanted to scream. I wanted to throw something. I wanted to list every academic achievement, every award, every recognition I'd earned that they'd somehow missed or dismissed. But instead, I just sat there, swallowing the pain like I'd been doing my entire life, nodding like their words made sense, agreeing with my own diminishment because that's what I'd been trained to do. We're not saying you can't practice law, my mother added, as if she was throwing me a bone. Of course you can. Get a job at a firm somewhere. Work your way up slowly. Build experience. But don't try to compete with your brother. Don't reach for things that are beyond your grasp. Just Stay humble. Stay humble. The family motto for me, apparently. The invisible chains they'd been wrapping around my ambition since childhood, disguised as wisdom. My brother? He just sat there smiling, counting his money, probably already planning his empire. Not a word of protest about the unfairness, not a suggestion that maybe I deserved something too. Why would there be? This was his world, and I was just living in it. But here's the thing about pain. Sometimes it clarifies everything. Sitting there, watching my parents fund my brother's dreams while dismissing mine, something crystallized inside me. A cold, hard understanding that this family had never seen me as equal, never would see me as equal, and that all my hoping and trying and achieving meant nothing to them. I had been the consolation prize my entire life. Let me paint you a picture of what growing up in this family was really like, because that graduation day scene, that was just the crescendo of a lifetime of systematic favoritism that would make your blood boil. When we turned 16, same day, same birthday, because twins, my parents threw this massive party. Huge tent in the backyard, all the relatives, neighbors, family, friends, and in the driveway sat two vehicles. A brand new BMW convertible with a giant red bow on it, and a used mountain bike I'd seen at the local pawn shop. Guess which one was mine? Now, boys, my father announced to the crowd, we got each of you something that fits your personality and needs. He walked over to the BMW and put his arm around my brother. This is for our future CEO, he said to applause and laughter. He's got places to go and people to meet. He needs something that matches his potential. Then he looked at me standing next to the bicycle, and his voice shifted to that same patronizing tone I'd grown to despise. And this is perfect for you. Good exercise, environmentally friendly, builds character. It's practical and humble, just like you. Practical and humble. Even my birthday gift was a lesson in knowing my place. The worst part wasn't the bike itself. The worst part was standing there in front of everyone, forced to smile and say thank you, while inside I was dying. Forced to pretend that a used bicycle was equivalent to a luxury car, because anything else would be ungrateful and jealous. My brother drove off in his BMW that night with three friends, music blasting, living his teenage dream. I rode my pawnshop bicycle to the corner and back, alone, trying not to cry. But the vehicles were just the beginning. Throughout high school, my brother played football. Not particularly well, mind you. He warmed the bench most games. But every Friday night, there were my parents in the stands, wearing his jersey number, cheering like he was the next Tom Brady. They never missed a game, not one. Meanwhile, I was in the academic decathlon, debate team, honor society. I won regional competitions, state awards, scholarships. My debate team went to nationals 3 years running, and I was team captain twice. You know how many of those competitions my parents attended? Zero, not one. We're so proud of your brother making varsity, my mother would gush to anyone who'd listen. He's such a natural athlete, such a team player. He's gonna go places. When I'd bring home academic awards, and there were many, the response was always the same lukewarm acknowledgement. That's nice, dear. Put it on your shelf. No celebration, no bragging to friends, no sense that they were proud or impressed. When I won the state championship in policy debate my senior year, beating teams from schools 3 times our size, you know what my father said? Well, I hope all that talking serves you well in the real world. That's it. That was my congratulations for achieving something genuinely exceptional. Meanwhile, when my brother scored his first touchdown in garbage time of a blowout game, they threw him a party. The message was clear. His accomplishments mattered. Mine were just hobbies. College was more of the same, only amplified. They paid for everything for him: tuition, room and board, spending money, study abroad, you name it. Spring break in Cancun? Covered. New laptop every year? No problem. Whatever the golden child wanted, the golden child got. Me? I worked 3 part-time jobs, took out student loans, applied for every scholarship and grant I could find. When I asked for help with tuition, my father looked at me like I'd asked him to buy me a yacht. Son, hard work builds character. Your brother needs to focus on his studies and networking. You're more self-sufficient. This will be good for you. Self-sufficient. That was code for you're on your own. The irony? I maintained a higher GPA while working those 3 jobs than my brother did with zero financial pressure. I graduated with honors. He graduated with a gentleman's C average and a resume full of fraternity parties. But none of that mattered to them. He was still the future, and I was still the afterthought. Law school was supposed to be different. I thought, naively, desperately, that maybe when we both chose the same professional path, they'd finally see that I was just as capable, just as ambitious, just as worthy of their support and pride. I was wrong. Even in law school, the favoritism found new ways to manifest. When my brother struggled with constitutional law, they hired him a private tutor, the best in the city, $200 an hour. When I mentioned I was having trouble with tax law, my mother suggested I study harder and maybe find a study group. When he got a prestigious internship at a corporate firm, an internship he got through my father's golf buddy, they celebrated with dinner at the most expensive restaurant in town. When I earned an internship at the public defender's office, an internship I got through my own merit and interviews, my father actually frowned. Public defense? Son, that's not real law. That's just helping criminals. You should be thinking bigger, like your brother. Like your brother. The phrase that haunted my entire existence. When we both passed the bar exam, which I did on the first try while he needed 2 attempts, guess whose success dominated the family dinner conversation? We always knew he'd make it. My mother beamed about my brother. He's got that legal mind, that sharp thinking. He's going to be a phenomenal attorney. About me passing? Well, that's good too, dear. That's good too. 23 years of education, countless hours of study, graduating summa cum laude from law school, passing one of the most difficult professional exams in the country, and I got that's good too. But I swallowed it all. Every slight, every dismissal, every moment of being treated like the consolation prize. I swallowed it because they were my family, and some pathetic part of me kept hoping that someday, somehow, they'd see my worth. That day on the couch, watching them hand him $500,000 while telling me to stay humble, was the day I stopped swallowing. But here's what they didn't know. Here's the secret that had been burning inside me for months. The one thing that gave me strength during all those moments of humiliation and dismissal. I wasn't alone in this family. I never had been. My father's sister, Aunt Margaret, had been watching this favoritism play out for years, and she was disgusted by it. While my parents saw me as the lesser twin, she saw something entirely different. She saw potential, intelligence, integrity, and a work ethic that actually impressed her. Aunt Margaret wasn't just any relative. She was a federal judge, appointed to the bench 15 years earlier after a distinguished career as a prosecutor and legal scholar. She had power, influence, and most importantly, she had principles about fairness and justice that my parents seemed to lack entirely. For years, she'd been my secret supporter. When my parents couldn't be bothered to attend my academic competitions, she was there in the audience. When they dismissed my achievements, she'd pull me aside and tell me how proud she was. When they questioned my potential, she'd remind me that true success comes from character, not from being handed everything on a silver platter. Your parents are making a mistake, she told me one evening after a particularly brutal family dinner where they'd spent 2 hours discussing my brother's mediocre law school grades while completely ignoring my law review publication. They're so blinded by favoritism that they can't see what's right in front of them. But don't let their blindness become yours. You're going to do great things, with or without their support. With or without their support. Those words meant everything to me. What my parents didn't know, what nobody in the family knew except Aunt Margaret and me, was that she'd been planning something for years, something that would change everything. 6 months before graduation, Aunt Margaret called me to her chambers. I thought it was just another one of our regular check-ins, where she'd ask about school and offer encouragement. Instead, she had documents spread across her desk and a look of grim determination on her face. "I'm dying," she said without preamble, because Aunt Margaret had never believed in sugarcoating anything. The words hit me like a physical blow. "What? How? When?" "Pancreatic cancer. 6 months, maybe 8 if I'm lucky. I've known for a while now, and I've been putting my affairs in order." She gestured to the papers, "which brings me to why you're here." I couldn't speak. This woman, the only person in my family who'd ever truly believed in me, was dying, and I was gonna lose the one ally I had. "Stop looking like that," she said sharply. "I'm not dead yet, and I have work to do. Important work that involves you." She slid the first document across the desk. "Do you know what this is?" I looked at the official letterhead, the legal language, the signatures and seals. "It looks like some kind of trust document." "Very good. It's a judicial grant trust, funded by my life savings and investments. $2.3 million, to be exact." She watched my eyes widen. "The purpose of this trust is to establish a legal aid center downtown and fund public interest legal work, the kind of work that actually helps people instead of just making rich people richer." I stared at the numbers, trying to process what she was telling me. "But that's not all." She slid over another document. "These are exclusive scholarship bonds, legal education funding that I've been contributing to for 15 years. They're worth another $800,000, designated specifically for lawyers who want to work in public service." My head was spinning. "Aunt Margaret, I don't understand. Why are you showing me this?" She smiled then, the first time I'd seen her look truly happy in months. "Because you're going to be in charge of all of it. The trust, the scholarship fund, the legal aid center, all of it will be under your control and direction." "Me? But I haven't even graduated yet. I don't have any experience running—" "You have something more important than experience," she interrupted. "You have integrity. You have compassion. You understand what it's like to be underestimated and dismissed. You know what justice really means because you've lived without it." She pulled out a third document, this one thicker than the others. And this is the real surprise. I looked at the deed, the property description, the transfer of ownership. "You're giving me a building? Not just any building. The Meridian Center downtown. 12 stories, premium location, currently valued at $4.2 million. She leaned back in her chair looking satisfied. "Your brother's fancy new law firm, the one your parents are funding, they're leasing space in my building, which means they're about to be leasing space in your building." The irony was so perfect, it was almost unbelievable. "They don't know?" Nobody knows. I've kept my real estate investments very private, and the building management company handles everything. But when the ownership transfers to you, you'll have complete control over leasing, rent, tenant agreements, everything. I felt like I was dreaming. This couldn't be real. People like me didn't inherit multi-million-dollar estates. People like me didn't get handed the keys to downtown commercial property. Why me? I asked. Why not split it between both of us? Or, because your brother doesn't need it, and more importantly, he doesn't deserve it. Her voice hardened. He's been handed everything his entire life. He's never had to work for anything, never had to prove himself, never had to develop the character that comes from struggle. He's weak, entitled, and frankly, not very bright. She leaned forward. But you? You've earned every opportunity you've gotten. You've worked 3 jobs to pay for school. You've excelled despite being ignored and dismissed. You've maintained your principles even when it would have been easier to become bitter or give up. You're exactly the kind of person who should have power and resources. I felt tears starting, but I fought them back. What do you want me to do with all of this? Change things, help people, show your family and everyone else what real success looks like. She gathered the documents and put them in a folder with my name on it. And maybe, just maybe, teach your parents a lesson about judging people by their potential instead of their favoritism. 3 months later, Aunt Margaret was gone. The funeral was a small affair. She'd requested no big ceremony, just family and a few close friends. My parents were appropriately somber, but I could tell they were already calculating inheritance possibilities. They kept asking me if I knew anything about her estate, if she'd left any instructions, if there were any surprises coming. If only they knew. The reading of the will was scheduled for 2 weeks after the funeral, but the bulk of Aunt Margaret's bequests to me had already been handled privately through her attorney. By the time my parents found out about the trust, the scholarship fund, and the building, everything would already be in motion. The official will reading was almost anticlimactic. My parents got small personal items, jewelry, furniture, some family photos. My brother got her car, a nice sedan, but nothing extraordinary. There was no mention of the trust, the building, or the scholarship fund because those had been handled separately years earlier. My parents seemed disappointed but not devastated. They'd been hoping for something more substantial, but they weren't suspicious. Why would they be? In their minds, I was just the steady, practical, unremarkable twin. If Aunt Margaret had been planning something big, surely it would have gone to the golden child. But I knew the truth, and soon everyone else would too. The months following Aunt Margaret's death were a whirlwind of legal paperwork, meetings with architects and contractors, interviews with potential staff for the Legal Aid Center, and most importantly, careful planning for the perfect moment to reveal everything. I wanted it to be public. I wanted it to be undeniable. I wanted it to be a moment that would force my family to confront their years of favoritism and dismissal in front of people who mattered. The opportunity came sooner than I expected. My brother's law firm grand opening was scheduled for a Friday evening in December. He'd been planning it for months. A lavish party to introduce himself to the legal community, network with potential clients, and basically announce his arrival as a major player in the city's legal scene. My parents were beside themselves with pride and excitement. They'd invited everyone they knew: judges, politicians, successful lawyers, business leaders, society types. It was going to be their moment to show off their successful son, their vindication for all those years of investing in the golden child. "You should come," my mother said when she called to tell me about the party. "It would mean a lot to your brother to have family there supporting him." Supporting him? Right, like he'd ever supported me. It's gonna be quite an event, my father added when he got on the phone. Really prestigious guest list. Your brother's going to make some incredible connections. This could launch him into the stratosphere. The stratosphere? Because apparently my brother wasn't just successful, he was destined for orbit. Will there be media there? I asked innocently. Oh, yes, the legal journal is sending a photographer, and Channel 7 wants to do a feature on young entrepreneurs. Your brother might even be on the evening news. My mother's voice was practically vibrating with excitement. Perfect. An audience, media coverage, and all the people who mattered in the legal community. It was exactly what I needed. I'll be there, I told them. Wonderful, my mother gushed. Just remember to dress appropriately. This is a professional event, very upscale, and maybe don't mention your public defender work too much. People there are going to be focused on real legal careers. Real legal careers. Even in inviting me to support my brother, she managed to dismiss what I was doing. But that was fine. After Friday night, we'd have a very different conversation about real legal careers. The weeks leading up to the party were crucial. I had calls to make, arrangements to finalize, and one very important presentation to prepare. The Legal Aid Center was almost ready to launch. The building renovations were nearly complete. The staff was hired, and the Bar Association had been briefed on everything. Most importantly, I'd reached out to Judge Patricia Williams, the head of the District Bar Council and one of the most respected figures in the state's legal community. She'd known Aunt Margaret well and had been briefed on the trust and the Legal Aid Center plans. This is remarkable, she'd said when I showed her the scope of what we were planning. Margaret always said you had potential, but this is beyond what anyone expected. The legal community is going to be very impressed. I was hoping you might be willing to make an announcement at my brother's party, I said. I think it would be appropriate to introduce the Legal Aid Center to the broader legal community, and there's going to be great media coverage. Judge Williams smiled. I think that's an excellent idea. In fact, I think this deserves more than just an announcement. This deserves recognition. Recognition. The word I'd been craving my entire life. What did you have in mind? The Bar Association has been looking for someone to head our new statewide justice initiative, a program focused on expanding access to legal services for underserved populations. It's a prestigious position, well-funded, and frankly, we haven't found anyone with the right combination of vision and integrity. She paused. Until now? I stared at her. Are you offering me the position? I'm offering you the opportunity to be considered, but between you and me, after seeing what you've accomplished with the Legal Aid Center, I think you're exactly what we're looking for. The announcement would be made at your brother's party if you're interested. Interested? I was interested in finally being recognized for my abilities instead of dismissed for my perceived limitations. I was interested in having a platform that matched my ambitions. I was interested in my parents finally seeing that they'd backed the wrong horse for 23 years. I'm very interested, I said. The night of the party, I stood in front of my closet for 20 minutes, trying to decide what to wear to my own vindication. I settled on my best suit, not as expensive as what my brother would be wearing, but sharp and professional. I wanted to look successful, but not like I was trying too hard. The party was being held at the Grand Metropolitan Hotel in their largest ballroom. My brother had spared no expense. Full bar, catered dinner, live jazz trio, flowers everywhere. The guest list was impressive. 3 state judges, the mayor, a dozen prominent attorneys, several business leaders, and even a congressman who happened to be in town. I arrived fashionably late, partly because I wanted to make an entrance, and partly because I needed the liquid courage that comes from knowing you're about to change everything. The scene was exactly what I'd expected. My brother holding court in the center of the room, surrounded by well-wishers and admirers, looking every inch the successful young attorney. My parents beaming beside him, introducing him to everyone as our lawyer son, with voices full of pride and satisfaction. I watched from the edge of the crowd as my father worked the room like a politician, bragging about his son's accomplishments, his vision, his bright future. My mother was doing the same, telling anyone who'd listen about how proud they were, how they'd always known he was destined for great things. He's built all of this himself, I heard my father tell a group of judges. Pure determination and natural talent. We're so proud of his independence and drive. Built it himself, with $500,000 of their money. The cognitive dissonance was staggering, but not surprising. Nobody seemed to notice me at first, which was fine. I was used to being invisible at family events. I found a spot near the back of the room where I could observe without being observed, nursing a drink and waiting for the right moment. That moment came when my brother stepped up to the microphone to give his speech. "Thank you all for being here tonight," he began, his voice confident and smooth. "This has been a dream of mine for as long as I can remember, to build something meaningful, something that would make a difference in our legal community." Build something meaningful. Right. I want to thank everyone who believed in me and supported me along the way, especially my parents, who taught me that success comes from hard work and determination. Hard work and determination, and $500,000. But who's counting? I also want to say that everything you see here, this firm, this office, this celebration, it's all the result of my own efforts and vision. I didn't take any shortcuts or rely on anyone else's help. This is what happens when you commit yourself fully to your goals and refuse to accept limitations. The crowd applauded, and my parents beamed like he'd just cured cancer. My brother continued for another 5 minutes, painting himself as a self-made success story while conveniently omitting the massive financial support that made it all possible. When he finished, there was enthusiastic applause and congratulations all around. People clustered around him, shaking hands, exchanging business cards, positioning themselves to benefit from his inevitable rise to the top. That's when Judge Williams stepped forward. "Excuse me," she said, her voice carrying the authority that comes from decades on the bench. "If I could have everyone's attention for just a moment." The room quieted. When a federal judge wants to speak, people listen. "I have an unexpected announcement to make tonight, one that I think will be of great interest to everyone here." She looked around the room until her eyes found me. "Would you please join me up here?" Every head in the room turned to look at me. I could see the confusion on my parents' faces, the surprise on my brother's, the curiosity on everyone else's. What could the invisible twin possibly have to do with anything important? I walked through the crowd, feeling every eye on me, hearing the whispered questions and speculation. When I reached the front of the room, Judge Williams smiled at me warmly. "Ladies and gentlemen, I'd like you to meet the new director of the statewide Justice Initiative and the founder of the city's newest and most ambitious legal aid center." The room erupted in surprised murmurs. I could see people leaning toward each other, asking questions, trying to understand what was happening. Judge Williams continued. "Some of you may not know that we've been developing a comprehensive program to expand legal services to underserved populations throughout the state. It's a multi-million-dollar initiative that required someone with exceptional vision, integrity, and commitment to justice. My parents looked like they'd been struck by lightning. My brother's mouth was literally hanging open. After an extensive search, we found that person right here in our own community. Through the generous endowment of the late Judge Margaret Thompson, a 12-story legal aid center is being established downtown, along with scholarship programs and community outreach initiatives that will serve as a model for the entire nation. The crowd was riveted now. This was bigger than anyone had expected. The person chosen to lead this initiative has demonstrated not only academic excellence, graduating summa cum laude from law school, but also real-world experience in public service and an unwavering commitment to justice for all. Judge Williams turned to me. "Would you like to say a few words?" This was it, the moment I'd been dreaming of, planning for, working toward, for months. Every slight, every dismissal, every moment of being treated as less than had led to this. I stepped up to the microphone and looked out at the crowd. My parents were staring at me like they were seeing a stranger. My brother looked like he was going to be sick. Everyone else looked fascinated, waiting to hear what the quiet twin had to say. "Thank you, Judge Williams, and thank you all for being here tonight." My voice was steady, calm, controlled. I have to admit, this isn't exactly how I planned to make this announcement, but sometimes the best moments are the unexpected ones. I paused, looking directly at my parents. My late aunt, Judge Margaret Thompson, believed that justice begins with fairness, even inside the home. She understood that true potential isn't always the loudest or the most obvious. Sometimes it's quiet, steady, and overlooked. A few people in the crowd nodded. They were starting to understand that this wasn't just about legal aid. The statewide justice initiative isn't just about providing legal services to those who need them most. It's about recognizing that worth and potential come in many forms, and that sometimes the people who are dismissed or underestimated are exactly the ones who should be leading. I could see my father's face reddening, my mother's eyes starting to well up with what might have been tears of realization or shame. My aunt left me more than just financial resources. She left me a lesson about seeing people for who they really are, not who we assume they should be. She taught me that justice isn't just about the law. It's about fairness, equality, and giving everyone a chance to prove their worth. The room was completely silent now. Even the wait staff had stopped moving. So tonight, I want to dedicate this initiative to everyone who has ever been told they don't have potential, that they should stay humble, that they should know their place. Because sometimes, knowing your place means refusing to accept the place others have assigned to you. The applause started slowly, with Judge Williams, then spread through the room like a wave. People were standing, clapping, some even cheering. I saw respected attorneys nodding approval, judges looking impressed, community leaders exchanging meaningful glances. My parents sat in stunned silence, the weight of their years of favoritism and dismissal finally hitting them. My brother looked smaller somehow, diminished by the realization that his moment had been completely overshadowed. But I wasn't done yet. As the applause died down, I smiled and continued. "I also want to thank my family for teaching me some valuable lessons about perseverance and self-reliance. They showed me that sometimes you have to build your own support system and create your own opportunities." The barb was subtle but unmistakable. Several people in the crowd were looking at my parents now, clearly understanding the subtext. The Legal Aid Center will be opening in January, located in the renovated Meridian Center downtown. We'll be providing free legal services to anyone who needs them, regardless of their ability to pay or their perceived worth in society. I looked directly at my brother. We believe everyone deserves quality representation and a fair chance at justice. More applause, but I could see that my brother was starting to put pieces together. The Meridian Center was where his new firm was located, the building he'd been bragging about leasing space in, the building that was apparently now a legal aid center. After the formal presentation ended, I was surrounded by congratulations, business cards, and invitations to lunch meetings. The legal community was genuinely excited about the initiative, and several people mentioned that they'd heard great things about me from various sources. But the conversations I was really interested in were happening at the other side of the room, where my family stood in a tight huddle, clearly trying to process what had just happened. I made my way through the crowd of well-wishers and approached them. My parents looked at me like they were seeing me for the first time in their lives. "Congratulations," my brother said, his voice tight and forced. "That's quite an achievement." Quite an achievement. Even in his congratulations, he couldn't hide his resentment. "Thank you," I replied calmly. "It's been in development for months. Aunt Margaret and I worked on it together before she passed." My mother's eyes widened. "Aunt Margaret? She never mentioned anything about this to us." "No," I said simply. "She wouldn't have." My father cleared his throat, clearly struggling to process this new reality. "Son, this is incredible. We had no idea you were working on something this significant." We had no idea, because they'd never bothered to ask what I was doing with my life beyond their assumption that it wasn't very important. "There's actually something else we need to discuss," I said, keeping my voice conversational. "About your lease." My brother frowned. "What lease?" "Your office lease at the Meridian Center." I watched comprehension dawn on his face. "That building is now part of the Legal Aid Center complex. I'll be taking over all the leasing decisions." The color drained from his face. "What do you mean taking over?" "I mean the building is mine now. It was part of Aunt Margaret's estate, transferred to me several months ago." I smiled pleasantly. "But don't worry, I believe everyone deserves fair treatment and equal opportunity." My parents looked like they were having trouble breathing. "What does that mean for my firm?" my brother asked, his voice barely above a whisper. "It means you have two options. You can pay fair market rent for your space, which, given the building's location and amenities, has recently been appraised at significantly higher rates than what you're currently paying. Or you can find alternative accommodations." The silence stretched for what felt like hours. My parents were staring at me like I'd grown a second head. My brother looked like he was going to throw up, and I felt a calm satisfaction that I'd never experienced before. "How much higher?" my father finally asked. I named a figure that was exactly fair market value. No vindictive markup, no family discount, just exactly what any other tenant would pay for similar space. My brother went pale. "I can't afford that, not yet. I'm just starting out." "I understand," I said sympathetically. "Starting a business is challenging, especially when you're trying to build something entirely on your own merit." The emphasis on "your own merit" wasn't lost on anyone. My mother finally found her voice. "Surely there's some family consideration." "Of course there is," I interrupted. "The same family consideration I received when I needed help with tuition. The same family consideration I got when I asked for support starting my career. The same family consideration I was shown when you handed my brother $500,000 while telling me to stay humble." She flinched like I'd slapped her. "I believe in equal treatment," I continued. "Everyone gets the same opportunities, the same consideration, the same chance to prove themselves. No favorites, no special treatment, no assumptions about who deserves what." My father's jaw was clenched. This is petty revenge. No, I said calmly. This is justice. This is what fairness actually looks like when it's applied equally. I looked at each of them in turn. You have 60 days to decide. Pay fair market rent or vacate. Same terms I'd offer any tenant. Before they could respond, Judge Williams appeared at my elbow. I'm sorry to interrupt, but Channel 7 wants to do a quick interview for the evening news. Are you available? Of course, I said, then looked back at my family. We can continue this conversation later. I need to go talk to the media about the Justice Initiative. As I walked away with Judge Williams, I could hear them behind me. My parents' frantic whispers, my brother's panicked questions, the sound of their carefully constructed world beginning to crumble. The interview went perfectly. I talked about the Legal Aid Center, the importance of equal access to justice, and the vision Aunt Margaret and I had shared about helping underserved communities. The reporter was impressed. The cameraman got great footage, and I came across as professional, passionate, and committed. When I finished, there was a small crowd of attorneys and judges waiting to congratulate me. Business cards were exchanged. Lunch meetings were scheduled, and several people mentioned that they'd been following my work in the public defender's office and were excited to see what I'd do with these new resources. For the first time in my life, I was being seen, truly seen, for my abilities and potential rather than being dismissed as the lesser twin. The party wound down around 11, and as people began to leave, I found myself standing near the hotel entrance, accepting final congratulations and making plans for follow-up meetings. The evening had exceeded every expectation I'd had. My parents approached as I was saying goodbye to the last group of well-wishers. "Can we talk?" my mother asked, her voice smaller than I'd ever heard it. Of course. They led me to a quiet corner of the hotel lobby, away from the remaining guests and staff. For a long moment, nobody spoke. Finally, my father cleared his throat. "We owe you an apology," he said, the words clearly difficult for him. I waited. We made some assumptions about your potential, your ambitions. We were wrong." Some assumptions. That was one way to put 23 years of systematic favoritism. My mother was crying now, tears running down her cheeks. "We're so proud of you, what you've accomplished, what you're doing. It's incredible. We should have seen it sooner." Should have seen it sooner. Like it was a matter of timing rather than willful blindness. "We want to support you now," my father continued. "Whatever you need for the Legal Aid Center, the Justice Initiative, we want to help." They wanted to help, now. After I'd proven I didn't need them, they suddenly wanted to be supportive parents. "That's very generous," I said carefully. "But I have all the support I need." "Please," my mother said, "let us be part of this. Let us help our son achieve his dreams. Our son achieve his dreams. Not help you or support your work. Our son," like they were claiming credit for something they'd actively tried to discourage. "I appreciate the offer," I said, "but I think it's important that I continue to build this on my own merit. You understand?" The phrase, "my own merit," hit them like a physical blow. It was exactly what they'd always said about my brother, the excuse they'd used for giving him everything while giving me nothing. "We made mistakes," my father admitted. "Big mistakes. We see that now." Now. They saw it now, when I had power and resources and recognition. They saw it now, when ignoring me was no longer an option. "I'm sure you did what you thought was best at the time," I said diplomatically. "But those decisions taught me some valuable lessons about self-reliance and determination." I was throwing their own words back at them, the justifications they'd always used for treating me as less important than my brother. "What about your brother?" My mother asked quietly. What happens to his firm? That's up to him, I said. He has the same choices as any other tenant: pay market rent or find somewhere else. But he's family. Yes, he is, and family should be treated fairly and equally. No special favors, no assumptions about who deserves what. Just equal opportunity and equal expectations. My father's face was red with frustration. You're punishing him for our mistakes. I'm treating him exactly the way you taught me to treat family, I replied calmly, with the same consideration and support I received when I needed help. The conversation continued for another 10 minutes, but it was essentially over. They wanted forgiveness they hadn't earned, support for the son they'd always favored, and special treatment for family members who'd never extended the same courtesy to me. But I was done being the understanding one, the patient one, the one who accepted less because it was easier than fighting for what I deserved. As I drove home that night, I thought about Aunt Margaret and how proud she would have been, not just of the success, but of the way I'd handled it, with dignity, professionalism, and without the vindictive cruelty my family probably deserved. I'd proven that I was exactly who she'd always believed I was: someone worthy of opportunity, respect, and recognition. The next morning brought exactly what I'd hoped for: validation, recognition, and the sweet satisfaction of being right about my own potential. The Channel 7 interview aired during the morning news, and it was everything I could have asked for. They'd edited it perfectly, highlighting my vision for the Legal Aid Center and my commitment to justice for underserved populations. I came across as articulate, passionate, and genuinely committed to making a difference. But more importantly, the phone started ringing before I'd even finished my coffee. The first call was from the state's attorney general, congratulating me on the appointment and mentioning that his office was always looking for talented attorneys interested in public service. The second was from a prominent civil rights organization that had heard about the Legal Aid Center and wanted to discuss potential partnerships. By noon, I'd received calls from 3 law schools asking if I'd be interested in guest lecturing, 2 legal journals wanting to interview me about access to justice issues, and a nonprofit foundation interested in providing additional funding for our programs. For the first time in my life, people were seeking me out, valuing my opinions, and recognizing my expertise. It was intoxicating. My brother called around 2 o'clock, his voice strained and careful. I saw the news coverage, he said. It was impressive. Impressive. Such enthusiasm. Thank you. Listen, about the lease situation, I was hoping we could work something out. Maybe a payment plan or a gradual increase or... The terms are standard market rate, 60 days notice, I said. Same as any other commercial tenant. But I'm your brother. Yes, you are. And I'm treating you exactly the same way family treated me when I needed support. I paused. Fair and equal, remember? There was a long silence. Finally, he said, I can't afford market rate. Not right now. Then you'll need to make some decisions about your business model or find alternative accommodations. You're really going to put me out of business? I'm really going to treat you like an adult who can make his own business decisions without special family favors. Another silence. Then, quietly, I never asked for special treatment. You didn't have to ask. It was just automatically given to you your entire life. I kept my voice level, matter of fact. Now you get to experience what the rest of us call normal, being judged by your actual abilities rather than your perceived potential. He hung up without saying goodbye. My parents called an hour later, tag-teaming me like they were conducting an intervention. We've been thinking about our conversation last night, my mother began. We want to make things right. Make things right. Like 23 years of favoritism could be fixed with a conversation and good intentions. We're prepared to offer you a significant investment in the Legal Aid Center, my father added. Consider it our way of showing support for what you've accomplished. An investment, not an apology or acknowledgement of wrongdoing, but an investment, like they were business partners rather than parents who'd systematically undermined one child while elevating the other. We could also help your brother with his rent situation, my mother continued. Bridge the gap until his firm becomes profitable. There it was, the real agenda. They wanted to buy their way out of the consequences of their favoritism while still protecting the golden child from experiencing any real adversity. That's very generous, I said, but I think it's important that everyone in this family learns to succeed based on their own merit. You're being unreasonable, my father said, his voice getting sharper. This is family business, not some corporate transaction. Family business, right. When they were cutting me out of opportunities, it was just practical decision making. When I was applying the same standards to my brother, suddenly everything was about family loyalty. You're absolutely right, I said. This is family business, which is why I'm handling it exactly the way I learned from watching this family operate. That's not fair. No, it's not fair. It never was fair. But it's consistent, which is more than I can say for how you've treated your children. The conversation devolved from there, with my parents alternating between guilt trips, anger, and desperate attempts to negotiate special treatment for my brother. I listened patiently, responded calmly, and didn't budge an inch. When they finally hung up, I felt something I'd never experienced before, complete certainty that I was doing the right thing. The weeks that followed were a whirlwind of activity and validation. The Legal Aid Center was featured in 3 different legal publications. I was invited to speak at a state bar conference, and the Attorney General's office reached out about a potential consulting role on criminal justice reform. Meanwhile, my brother was scrambling. He'd approached several commercial real estate agents about alternative office space, but everything in the downtown area was either too expensive or unsuitable for a law practice. The suburban options were significantly cheaper, but would hurt his ability to network with the legal elite he'd been trying to cultivate. He called me twice more, each conversation a little more desperate than the last. I'm willing to pay a partial increase, he said during the second call. Maybe split the difference between what I'm paying now and full market rate. Market rate is market rate, I replied. It's not a negotiation. This is ridiculous. We're family. Family should help family. I agree completely. Family should help family, equally, fairly, based on need rather than favoritism. You know I never asked them to favor me. No, you just accepted it for 23 years without ever questioning whether it was fair or suggesting they should treat me equally. He had no response to that because we both knew it was true. The deadline came and went. My brother's firm moved to a cheaper location, 15 minutes outside downtown, a perfectly adequate office space that cost about half of what he'd been paying at the Meridian Center. It wasn't prestigious, but it was functional, and honestly, it was probably more appropriate for a solo practitioner just starting out. My parents were furious. You've damaged your brother's career prospects, my father accused during one particularly heated phone call. That location is going to hurt his ability to build a client base. His career prospects will be determined by his abilities and work ethic, I replied, just like everyone else's. You're being vindictive. I'm being consistent. I'm applying the same standards to him that were always applied to me. It's not the same thing. You're absolutely right. It's not the same thing. He got 23 years of support, encouragement, and financial backing. He got one inconvenient business decision. The scales are nowhere near balanced. But the truth was, I wasn't trying to balance scales or get revenge. I was trying to establish a new normal where family members were treated with equal respect and consideration, where assumptions about potential weren't based on arbitrary favoritism, and where everyone had to earn their success rather than having it handed to them. 6 months after that night at the hotel, I was invited to give the keynote address at the State Bar Association's annual dinner. The theme was Justice and Opportunity, and they wanted me to talk about the Legal Aid Center and the broader issues of access to legal services. I spent weeks preparing the speech, thinking about what message I wanted to convey, what lessons I'd learned from my journey from invisible twin to recognized leader in the legal community. The dinner was held at the same hotel where my brother's party had been, which felt symbolically perfect. The audience was larger, over 300 attorneys, judges, law school deans, and other legal professionals. My parents and brother were there, sitting at a table near the back, looking uncomfortable but present. I'd invited them personally because I wanted them to hear what I had to say. When I was growing up, I began, I was often told that I should be realistic about my potential, humble about my ambitions, and grateful for small opportunities. I was told that some people are natural leaders and others are natural followers, and that knowing which category you belong in is the key to happiness. I could see my parents shift in their seats. For years, I accepted that narrative. I convinced myself that being overlooked was just part of my personality, that being dismissed was just the natural order of things, that maybe I really was meant for smaller dreams and quieter achievements. The room was silent, attentive, but my aunt, Judge Margaret Thompson, taught me something different. She taught me that potential isn't always loud or obvious. She taught me that the people who are dismissed or underestimated often have the most to offer because they've had to develop real character, real resilience, real integrity. I looked directly at my family's table. She taught me that justice isn't just about the law. It's about fairness, equality, and giving everyone a genuine opportunity to prove their worth. I went on to talk about the Legal Aid Center, about the importance of equal access to justice, about the responsibility we all have to recognize potential wherever we find it. But the underlying message was personal, and everyone in the room understood it. When I finished, the standing ovation lasted for nearly 2 minutes. Judges, attorneys, law professors, people whose respect I'd craved my entire life, were on their feet applauding not just my accomplishments, but my vision and my character. After the dinner, there was a reception where I was surrounded by congratulations, business cards, and invitations to collaborate on various projects. The legal community had fully embraced me as one of their rising stars, and the opportunities being presented were beyond anything I'd imagined. But the conversation I was most interested in happened near the end of the evening when my parents approached me one final time. "Your speech was beautiful," my mother said, and for the first time in months, she seemed genuinely emotional rather than manipulative. "Thank you." My father cleared his throat. "We've been doing some thinking, some soul searching, I guess you'd call it." I waited. "We owe you more than an apology," he continued. "We owe you an acknowledgement that we failed you as parents, not just in the practical ways, but in the fundamental way that parents are supposed to believe in their children." My mother was crying again, but these tears seemed different than the frustrated ones from before. "We saw what we wanted to see instead of what was actually there," she said. "We made assumptions based on, I don't even know what, birth order, personality, Some ridiculous idea about who was supposed to be successful? We were wrong, my father said simply. Not just wrong about the money or the support, but wrong about you, wrong about your potential, wrong about your character, wrong about what kind of person you'd become. I felt something shifting inside me. Not forgiveness exactly, but maybe the beginning of understanding. The truth is, my mother continued, watching you these past few months has made us realize that you're exactly the kind of person we should have been proud of all along. Your integrity, your compassion, your commitment to justice, those are the qualities that matter. Your brother is successful because we made it easy for him to be successful, my father added. But you're successful because of who you are as a person. There's no comparison. It was the acknowledgement I'd been waiting for my entire life, and now that I had it, I discovered something surprising. It mattered less than I'd thought it would. I appreciate you saying that, I told them. But I want you to understand something important. I didn't do any of this to prove you wrong or to get your approval. I did it because it was the right thing to do, and because Aunt Margaret believed I could. They nodded, looking smaller and older than I'd ever seen them. I also want you to understand that this doesn't change anything regarding my brother's lease situation or any future family business decisions. I still believe in equal treatment and merit-based support. We understand, my father said, and honestly, we respect that. It's the right approach, even if it's difficult for us to accept. My brother appeared then, looking awkward and uncomfortable but determined. I wanted to congratulate you, he said. Your speech it was really impressive, and I wanted to apologize. This was unexpected. For what? For never questioning the favoritism? For accepting advantages I didn't earn and never wondering if it was fair to you? He looked genuinely uncomfortable. For never standing up for you when Mom and Dad were being dismissive? I studied his face, trying to determine if this was genuine or strategic. I've been thinking a lot about what you said, about me never asking for special treatment, but accepting it anyway. You were right. I was complicit in how they treated you, even if I didn't actively participate. Thank you for saying that. I also wanted you to know that the new office is working out fine. Actually, it's probably better for my practice anyway. Lower overhead, more accessible to regular clients, less pretentious. He managed a rueful smile. Turns out being forced to live within my actual means was probably good for me. I felt a flicker of something that might have been pride in him. And I wanted to ask if maybe we could start over. As brothers, I mean, without all the family dynamics and favoritism and competition. He paused. I'd like to get to know the person you actually are, not the person I assumed you were. It wasn't a complete reconciliation. There was too much history for that. But it felt like the beginning of something healthier, more honest, more equal. I'd like that too, I said. As I drove home that night, I thought about how much had changed in just 6 months. I'd gone from being the invisible twin to being a recognized leader in my field. I'd gone from accepting scraps of attention to commanding respect from people who mattered. I'd gone from swallowing pain and dismissal to standing up for my own worth. But more importantly, I'd learned that validation from others, even family members, was far less important than validation from yourself. I'd learned that sometimes the greatest gift someone can give you is the opportunity to prove them wrong. I'd learned that justice isn't just about legal systems. It's about refusing to accept unfair treatment in any form. The Legal Aid Center officially opened 3 months later, to tremendous community support and media attention. We were serving over 200 clients within the first month, handling everything from housing disputes to immigration issues to family law matters. The scholarship program was fully funded and supporting 12 law students committed to public service careers. The statewide justice initiative was expanding beyond anyone's expectations, with additional funding from the state legislature and interest from federal agencies. I'd been asked to testify before Congress about access to justice issues, and 3 universities had offered me adjunct professor positions. My brother's practice was growing steadily, built on genuine merit rather than family connections or prestigious locations. He was handling mostly small business legal work and personal injury cases, not glamorous, but honest and needed. He seemed happier, actually, less pressured to live up to impossible expectations. My parents had become supportive in quiet, appropriate ways, sending newspaper clippings about my work, attending public events where I was speaking, expressing pride without trying to claim credit. They'd learned to treat both their sons as adults capable of earning their own success. But the most important change was internal. I'd stopped waiting for other people's approval to feel good about myself. I'd stopped accepting other people's limitations as truth. I'd stopped believing that being overlooked meant being overlooked worthy. I'd learned that sometimes the family you're born into won't value you the way you deserve to be valued. Sometimes they'll make assumptions about your potential based on factors that have nothing to do with your actual abilities. Sometimes they'll systematically favor one child over another for reasons that make no rational sense. But here's what I learned that matters more than all of that. The world is full of people who will recognize your worth if you give them the opportunity. There are mentors like Aunt Margaret who will see your potential even when your own family doesn't. There are opportunities waiting for people who are willing to work for them rather than waiting for them to be handed over. And sometimes, just sometimes, proving everyone wrong is the sweetest victory of all. The invisible child doesn't have to stay invisible forever. Sometimes all it takes is one person who believes in you, one opportunity to show what you're capable of, and the courage to step out of the shadow you've been assigned and into the light you've earned. My name is on the door of the Legal Aid Center now. My picture is in the newspaper. My voice is heard in important meetings about justice and equality. But more than any of that, I sleep well at night knowing that I earned every bit of recognition I've received. And when people ask me about success, about overcoming obstacles, about dealing with family dynamics that seem insurmountable, I tell them this. Sometimes the family you're born into won't value you, but the world will when you finally step into your power. Sometimes being overlooked is just preparation for being undeniable. Sometimes the invisible child becomes the most visible adult. Sometimes justice delayed is justice earned. And sometimes proving them all wrong is exactly the motivation you needed to prove yourself right.